I think that the key is because we're all desiring, right, meaningful living.
Purpose.
Right? Purpose. Back in the day when I was really young, we were taught to keep work and home separate. And to keep feeling separate and compartmentalize. And it's impossible.
What can we do to learn and get better at those deeper conversations?
I mean, that's what our brains do. We form these beliefs, right? Where maybe we're all meant in the world to have different strengths and hone in on our strengths.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to take a quick break from our show to say a massive thank you and a big shout out to one of our amazing sponsors, Dave DiStefano. Dave is a mortgage broker with over 13 years in the business, and Dave has a great rapport with a network of lenders, including big banks, credit unions, trust companies, financial institutions, and private funds. He will work on your behalf to help you find the best mortgage with the most agreeable terms and the lowest interest rate. After meeting Dave many times and having great discussions with him, he provides a level of confidence and comfort in knowing that he is going to take care of you. If you want to reach out to Dave, you can find his office on 6293 Thorold Stone Road in Niagara Falls. For more information or to make an appointment for any of your mortgage needs, call 905-933-1090. That's 905-933-1090. And thanks for listening. Back to the show.
What's going on, Meeting Gold listeners? It's Chris Battaglia, 416 Coffee. Use the coupon code Meeting Gold to get 10% off your first order at 416 Coffee. Enjoy the show.
Also, I find any time that families have time off, things that have been put on the side burner come to the surface, right? So if there's an underlying marital issue, or if somebody's been, not really had a chance to talk about things that, just because of the busyness of life, that'll bubble up. So, for example, in the summer, I would say that we're less busy with kids and youth because they're not in school and they're on vacations and such. But we're busier with couples counseling and family counseling.
Because they're spending more time together.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? You see that you're spending more time together and things come to light.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, oh, gosh, because when we get busy, it's easy just to, not today. It's never a good time to talk about it. We're having a good day, or we're busy, or we're taking the kids out and about, or we just avoid it.
So, Sherry, the information that I did on you behind the scenes, from my understanding, you have over 25 years in therapy across the board. I saw you were working with children for about 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And then now you've transitioned into, you can kind of touch on the role a little bit where you're at now.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I was working in outpatient, right, for a long time at the St. Catharines Hospital, mental health. So that was with children with trauma. But then I also worked with families, and then I also was the sexual abuse therapist and domestic violence.
So you've seen across the board.
I've seen across the board. And then also, right, you're part of a great team. So I was part of a team with psychiatry and psychology and nurses, mental health nurses. And it was a wonderful learning experience. Right. Yeah.
What was the biggest thing that you took out of therapy at that time, working with child trauma and then transitioning over to the sexual abuse?
I think the whole concept of resilience. That's the
thing that's across the board.
That's what really struck me, and that has been what excites me the most, is the idea that there's always something we can do. It's that nothing's worse than the feeling of, I don't know what to do, or I can't handle this. And when we have a locus of control where you say, yes, there are some things you can do. It won't make it go away, but it'll help you find a way through. Right?
Is the social construct of just be okay, just be okay, just be okay, is that something that's been a negative push for quite a while?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, we mean well, and often we say things because we don't know what else to say. But to say to somebody right now, that's really, really tough. Is there anything I can do? Can I give you a hug?
Right.
right?
Right.
But to validate it, because sometimes that leans towards the tendency to want to minimize our feelings, and we're like, oh, okay, I'm okay. The whole idea is that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah. I will say, I feel like I've seen more of a push for that in the last few years on social media, saying it's okay not to be okay. But is it really enough for a simple post on social media to say it's okay not to be okay? Is that really enough to make somebody feel like that way?
No, not at all.
What do we have to see in society over the next few years to continuously build that and make it stronger?
I think we need a deeper understanding of what that person is really going through, right? So genuine curiosity, and so that we can say, I really want to understand what's happening, and how can we all together as a community help address this, right? Because catchphrases, they're helpful, like, Belle, let's talk. Definitely, they're really, really helpful. But I think we really need to understand, like, what is really happening? Why is this happening for different people? And what can we do about it?
Right.
Right? So it's not just it's good to understand it, but also we really want to seek how to help. So there's a family level, and then there's a society level, right? So if you think as a family member, I think honestly just, saying, you don't even have to talk about it. We can just sit together. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. And the big importance is to seek support. Right?
So how can we affect that on a large scale? Because I'm thinking in my head, well, social media is great because you can hit so many different people. But what you're saying is it's got to be on a deep level, and you've got to have that genuine interest. How can we create genuine interest across millions of people?
I think that the key is because we're all desiring, right, meaningful living.
Purpose.
Right? Purpose. So yes, there's the clinical level of somebody, sadly, many of us have reached a point where we need support through doctors and therapists. And mind you, I believe that we could all go to therapy, obviously. But there's also the idea that what will prevent us from getting to that point or buffer it. And that's where, to get to the deeper level, that's where business is becoming more engaged in the culture of their workplace. Like back in the day when I was really young, we were taught to keep work and home separate and to keep feelings separate and compartmentalize. And that's impossible. So if we prioritize mental health, right, if we prioritize it in our workplace and be mindfully attuning to it, mental health, physical health, spiritual well-being, then we're more in tune with how that links to the other things that causes problems.
And I mean, we're spending more time at work than we are at home. Majority of society is doing
this. Is it.
Right.
And I think businesses are recognizing now that, are we on, by the way?
Yes.
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh, are we? Oh, sorry. Oh, I think businesses are recognizing now as well that when you invest into the morale of your group, of your employees, it's not just for be a good human being, which is wonderful, but it's also profitable.
Yeah.
I mean, you're having a higher level of engagement. You're having a higher level of productivity. I mean, when we talk about the stats on absenteeism, right, that's a concern, and when people, that goes up, that's an indicator of what's happening. But even more concerning is presenteeism. Right. So a lot of people are going to work and they're tired, they're fatigued, they're, stressed, and they're not their best self. Right. So that's the idea with resilience, is that we want to be our best self. And it is that proactive model of saying, how can I bounce back and be better? But also, how can I deal with the adversity in the least painful way as possible? Right. Because bad stuff will happen. So that's the idea, is knowing that, like if we have the pleasure of talking a year from now, there's going to be lots of really, really good things that have happened, and there's going to be some hiccups.
Yeah.
So if we're prepared for that, saying there are going to be hiccups, it's not a big surprise. And if we're maintaining our well-being on all levels, we are better prepared to deal with that.
You just put a good thought in my head. When I see somebody I haven't seen in a while, it's always, hey, how you've been? And all you'll ever talk about is the good things that have happened in the time that you last saw them, right? What if you changed the narrative and said, what was the biggest learning lesson you had in the last year or since I've seen you?
Exactly. And those are the kinds of conversations like when we think at kitchen table chit chats or at small group friendships, we're all seeking a little bit deeper, more meaningful conversation.
But we always avoid them.
It makes
Why,
us
Sherry?
uncomfortable.
Why? This is see, to me, this is conversation that is meaningful, is when you can go past the surface level stuff and actually talk on a deeper level, no phones, none of that, you are bound for stronger and better relationships.
I think there's a couple things there, though, is that when we need to have the energy for those conversations. So that's the other thing about maintaining, like self-care and maintaining all those things is so important, because that's one of the biggest things I'll hear, and I can relate myself, and I'll hear in my office a lot, is even small talk is painful. At the end of the day, I'm drained, I'm tired. Right. So yes, we want to have those meaningful conversations and they're really important, but we want to make sure they're timely. We want to make sure also what we're bringing to the table in terms of energy, all those types of things. Right.
So would you say that there's a time, and maybe this is an arrogant question, I don't know, but would you say that there's times for those hard conversations? I don't even want to call them hard conversations because they shouldn't be hard, but time for those deeper conversations and time for those small talk conversations.
Yeah. I think it needs to be balanced, and we need to use our humor as well. Right? Like at the kitchen table when you're with your family, you know, what was the best part of your day and what was the most challenging part of your day?
Right.
Right. But we don't want to dwell often on sometimes the things that can be triggered for people. Right. And if you want to have a deeper conversation one-on-one with someone later, that's great. And talking about, you know, what is your purpose and energizing conversations. And I love to talk with my colleagues about different things that are happening in my field and around the world. But to your point, there is a time and place. Sometimes you just want to relax.
Yeah. See, to me, this is the type of stuff that, like I said, creates deeper, more meaningful conversations that everybody can learn from. But let me ask you this. I'm going to make a statement and then ask a question.
Okay.
I don't feel that there's a lot of people that can have these conversations because they're not self-aware enough. One, would you agree or disagree with me? And two, if you agree, how do we go about building self-awareness?
I agree. I think self-awareness is key. We're hearing the trend growing more and more about the importance of emotional intelligence. And that is a very big part that's connected to meaningful relationships. And I think that helping people become comfortable with what can be uncomfortable conversations helps. And a lot of times we'll avoid conversations like what you're saying, if you're not sure what to say, right? Or you don't know the answer yourself. So emotional intelligence is more than, you know, just knowing how to get along with people, right? Self-awareness is really tapping into your ability to, on a daily basis, I believe, to self-reflect. So that, you know, I'm feeling something, I'm thinking something. What is that really about? So even something as simple as I'm feeling drained today, I'm feeling stressed today, I'm not sure what it is. Sometimes we know if we've had a bad night or whatever.
Yeah.
But is there something missing? Is there something that I need to tweak, right? Those are the type things that often we put on the sidebar in this hecticness of life. So slowing down will help us be more emotionally intelligent. Then we are more present. Right. Then we are more able to pick up the cues around us of what's happening. Right. Because when we are really busy and a little bit stressed, we avoid those deeper conversations because they take energy, but B, also we're caught up in our mind. And that is the movement, is we need to give our brain a break. Right. The brain was not meant to be the captain of the ship, and we get caught in our thoughts. And the brain has a negative bias. It'll always go to the worst case scenario. So a lot of the tips and strategies about resiliency is how to steer those thoughts in a different direction so that we're not feeling like I can't handle this or I don't know what to do. Those are the tappers of our energy.
Do you feel that, because I'm a very logical person, I look at things in a very logical way. So when you say something like that, I feel, okay, so how much time do I have to set aside a week towards myself? And I feel like I know the answer to what you're going to say is, well, it's dependent on the person. What do you feel you need? Can you kind of break that down a little bit? Like what, because you made a comment, you said, you know, when we're running around doing all these different things, we're not present enough because we don't have time to or focus on ourselves and be present. Because we're just focused on the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And then by the time the end of the day comes, you're exhausted and you can't even remember what you woke up with and had breakfast for, right?
Exactly.
So what can we do to be more present? How much time do we need to set aside? Like what does that really look like?
I believe it needs to be, not should be. That's not a nice way to phrase things. I hate the should, would, coulds that society puts on us. I recommend daily the way we start the day and the way we end the day. Because if we start with even deep breathing, a short guided meditation, something to get us back into our intuition, right? Because our intuition is our compass. Our intuition will guide us and steer us throughout the day. And if we're more present and calmer, if we take a few minutes, just a few minutes, it doesn't have to be an hour or half an hour. If some choose to do that, that's great. But you'd be surprised how short periods of time can make us more present. And automatically, not only are we more self-aware, but then we're also more aware of other people's, body language and how are they doing? And are we responding congruent to the situation as opposed to just reacting to assumptions and thoughts that are going on in our mind? And the more present we are, the more able we are to build meaningful relationships because people feel heard, they feel noticed, and they sense your genuine curiosity. You can always tell when somebody has something on their mind and they're not really listening.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, we've all done that, right? Yeah. And you can just see it in the eyes of thinking, I don't know what they're thinking, but they're not really fully present.
I'm called out for it all the time. My mind's overstimulated with so many different questions because I'm trying to figure out what type of person do I want to ask for, because there's a variety of different types of people in this world, right? You've got the people like, I would relate my mom is much like you. Very no phone. Let's just talk and listen. And you're not listening to me if you have your phone out. And let's have a meaningful conversation. I'm not in for a lot of small talk, right? Whereas myself or a good friend of mine, Andrew, are very similar. We're always on our phones. And as much as we want to say, well, we're working, we're communicating, we're having social interaction, we're really not. What I find is, and I'll be totally transparent, is I feel as if people like you, people like I know my mom, seem to be much more happy because they make it an intent to be so much more present. Is that true? Like, am I fair in saying that?
It is true. The more present we are definitely happier, because happiness isn't sometimes we focus on like an outcome. I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if. It's a matter of just seizing moments throughout a day where you feel happy, right? It's not focusing on the outcome. Yeah. Now, having said that, even like I certainly, and my family would attest to this, don't ever not fall into the trap of the phone. That's the thing. It's very addictive, right? Yeah. And it has a lot of wonderful things, technology and social media. And I love looking up different, psychologists and, different podcasts. But we really have to be mindful of the amount of time we spend on it. If we could just channel it into a positive direction, not too much time, because otherwise it actually can make us feel depressed.
Yes.
And then also know when to put it away. Like if you go into a restaurant and you look around the restaurant, you can have families, you can have couples, and you're going to notice that most of us are on our phones a little bit too much.
Yeah.
It's become almost normalized.
It's the easy escape.
Yeah.
Do you feel, and this is where my mind goes, when I started doing this podcast, I thought, wow, this is interesting. People actually really like conversation. Like, people like it, right?
We do.
You just kind of have to get them into the conversation. So what I find is the phone is the surface level to any sort of conversation, because it's, I'm just going to socialize with this person on social media when I have 5 people right in front of me, right? Mm-hmm. But then when somebody initiates a level of conversation, I find more often than not, people actually engage, put their phone away and talk. And if they don't, then, something's seriously wrong. But a lot of people will put their phone down.
Yeah, this is it, right?
So it's just initiating the conversation.
And really the topic can come up via the phone, right? Like, oh, what are you watching? What YouTube video have you got on? The idea is a wonderful platform, right? We just don't want to use it as our main social interaction.
Right.
Right. That's the risk of it. And they're designed to be addictive. I mean, we can scroll for long periods of time. Right. And the danger of that is like even like television, like anything, you know, our brain waves, you know, lower to or go down to a level that's not highly engaged. You're just going through the motions and you're an autopilot. And that's not good for our mental health at all.
Now, Sherry, my head goes to, well, I'm imagining a dinner table and a family. And when somebody puts their phone down, tries to initiate a level of conversation, what do they talk about? A lot of these people, I don't think, know how to have conversation, good conversation, because they have it so far and few between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What can we do to learn and get better at those deeper conversations?
I think it's becoming comfortable with it again. Right? If we think over during COVID, you know, the amount of isolation that happened, and that had, of course, you know, horrible effects on mental health in general for a lot of reasons. But one of them was directly related to social skills. So even, you know, a lot of my friends are teachers, are educators, and they're describing the gaps, right? And having, you know, with children and teens coming in and not being able to regulate their emotions or have even appropriate social skills. Mm. And then I think of adults, you know, that are going back to the workplace that are feeling a lot of anxiety and having trouble, you know, even with eye contact sometimes, or not sure what to say or how to start a conversation. So I think we need to practice it. It's like any other skill, but do it with deliberate intention. And that's the idea of self-awareness. And its key is that we're always mindful of how can I work on this and that I want to work on this. It's not just going to happen randomly. It can sometimes, but unless we make time for it, we're not going to grow that skill. It's like any other muscle. If you're going to go to the gym, you could go to the gym once a month or once a year. It's not
going to do anything.
No, but we have just to practice it and use humor going. It does feel awkward at first.
Yeah.
But I think, as you said earlier, if we're really curious about somebody and we're getting to know them, once we discover something that really energizes them, and you can tell by the look in their eyes, or even, you know, we really are excited about it. People love to talk about themselves and to get to know each other, right? And
I will say it is interesting when I'm imagining a dinner table conversation. You know, I'll let you answer this. I feel as if there's the type of people that are not so much the ask questions to other people type. Mm-hmm. They have a lack of genuine interest.
Yeah.
What do you think about those type of people? What can they, like, they don't seem very self-aware to me to ask those questions. They just don't, their head doesn't go to, hey, I'm genuinely curious about this person. Mm-hmm. They're very dull. I know people like that.
Yeah. And what does that trigger for you then? Like when you say
they're not interested in me.
Right.
They don't care. So why am I around them?
But you see, that is an assumption that you're making, right? You're assuming that because that person doesn't want to engage in a conversation or is curious about me, and that's what our brains do. We form these beliefs, right? Where maybe that person is shy.
Right.
Maybe that person has a little bit of social anxiety, or maybe that person's just more of an introvert and it's nothing personal.
Yeah.
We have to be really careful with some of the beliefs and assumptions that we start to make about that. So if somebody wants to work on that, if they're saying, Sherry, I really would like to be more comfortable at conversations with groups of people, that's great. You know, there's lots of things we can do about that. But if somebody is quite comfortable just being quieter, that's okay too.
You know, these kind of conversations really uplift me because it shows that there's a level of connection between human beings that you don't really know, but you can create in literally 20 minutes of having a conversation, asking, you know, there's not even the right questions, just being genuinely curious. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe if you meet a couple, hey, how'd you guys meet? Can you tell me about where you were in this photo? Or, you know, that actually leaves a lasting impression on somebody. Yeah. And it goes to our point, we were talking off camera about this, but the book, How to Win Friends and Influence Others, really talks about this, is you play influence and you're a great conversationalist if you can just learn to listen. I was actually reading it the other day, and that's what it
Yes.
said.
Yes.
And I remember Dale Carnegie was saying, well, a lot of people call me a good conversationalist. He said, well, I barely talk.
Yeah. You see, this is it. And that's where we were kind of joking, but there are full day workshops on active listening. And that's where being present comes in, because I don't think we intentionally not listen. We don't realize that, are we really, paying attention to somebody's body language? Are we really, listening to what they're saying? Or are we waiting to respond or just share our story? We want the reciprocity, but we want to make sure our conversations are open-ended and that we don't interrupt each other and that we really, really want to get to know that other person.
What can somebody do? Because I'm imagining somebody who has maybe a lack of genuine curiosity from the start and, a little bit shy. What can they do to be good listeners and initiate conversations that allow them to be good listeners?
Yeah, interestingly, they're often the best listeners.
Really?
Right? Because that's the thing. A lot of people will tell me, I really love to hear people's stories. I'm a great listener. And when they're quiet or, when people get talking about something, I think you're encouraged as on the other end of that. I think you're encouraged to keep talking if you can tell the person really, really is intrigued. If they look bored or disinterested, I'm like, oh, well, better get going,
Yeah.
But people will expand. I see that as a therapist as well in my office that, we all want to be heard and understood, right? There's a real desire for that. And it's not that people have to agree with us. We all just we want somebody to get us. But to be able to get other people, I think we have to also know ourselves, right?
Yes,
and that's where that ties back around to resiliency and emotional intelligence is if we don't know ourselves, right? Know our strengths, know our weaknesses, and work on them mindfully and deliberately, right?
So even to people who are not great in big social settings and great in big social settings. I went to an event, a real estate event in Texas last week. And one of the interesting things that the host said was, this is a very small event. It's a maybe 50, 60 people, but it's very intimate. There's times and place for big levels of conversation, like, 1,000+ people for different conferences, or 60 people for very, intimate conversations. So would you say that maybe somebody should go and figure out the strengths of, am I good in big settings or am I good in really small, intimate settings? Or if you're really good, should you be just amazing at both and just be able to adapt?
Yeah, I think it depends on your goal, what's important to you. But I think small steps, right? I think that it's small steps. So if you're not, in the beginning, very comfortable in large groups with certain things. Like we talk about props that you can carry with you that to start a conversation. You could come in prepared saying, with a couple of questions that, like say it's the time of year, for example, now it's spring and oh gosh, what are you going to be doing this spring? And did you go away this winter? We go in there scripted if we're not as naturally extroverted.
Yes.
And then over time, as we continually, kind of put ourselves in those settings, it becomes more comfortable. And that's ideally what we want to do is we want to stretch outside our comfort zone. That's really exciting, right? That's one of the things I love as an entrepreneur, right? Is you're constantly, and I'm sure you can relate, right? Yeah. And there's going to be, good times, there's going to be hard times, and I kind of like that. So that's where, when you think of social skills, it's the same kind of thing. But I think it's important, too, that if somebody else doesn't have that goal, like if they're comfortable saying, I don't want to be in large settings, that's not my thing, that's fine. It's only if that aligns with their life and that aligns with their goals that they have, and then that's fine. That's the idea. Is we don't ever want to be placing expectations on other people that don't match their own, right?
Yeah.
That don't align with their own. And we always want to have non-judgment, right? And where we're just very accepting and meet people where they're at.
Sherry, I kind of want to rewind a little bit because you are a very good listener, and I don't know if that comes naturally to you, like if that was something that was innately in you as the type of person that you are, or was that something that do you feel was developed? Like maybe take me back to your childhood. Was this something that you were around all the time, just good listeners? And
I think so. I think personality, we all come in the world with our traits, right? And I think I was always inclined to be like a a person who was always in tune to people's emotional well-being. I was kind of that person that would walk into a room, and if something was amiss, be like, what's wrong? You know, very aware of those things. But I think what I've cultivated as I've become older is the idea of being more present, so that I can heighten my self-awareness, because I have too, like a lot of us, the tendency to overthink and get trapped in our mind. And it became a habit for a lot of years. And with my training and with my meeting so many wonderful people, I've improved and worked on that. And because when you think of even the statistics about self-awareness, and I was at a presentation the other day and we were talking about what emotional intelligence is, being self-aware, meaning that you know your own feelings and what causes them, and you know how other people perceive you, and you have a good measure of empathy and all those things. And how many people would say they're self-aware and how many people would say they're not? And the majority of the room put up their hand. Oh, I have those skills I'm excellent at. Now, the research tells us that 95% of us think we are self-aware and emotionally intelligent, and only 10 to 15% of us actually are. Yes. So we do not know. We cannot fix what we do not know. So that's what it boils down to as well, is being, and I really embrace this, and it's tough, I'm going to tell you, is honest feedback. Because even with some of the personality measurements that, you know, we can do, and so many of them are extremely valid and reliable, and we can learn a lot about ourselves. I love those, but nothing helps me more, and I think others too, is to have other people fill out how they see us. Because oftentimes people don't see us the way we see ourselves.
The level of resilience that requires to receive honest feedback is extremely high. I mean, that's the epitome of resilience.
Oh, it sure is.
Because it's a direct reflection as to who you are as a person. I mean, somebody could say something about your company, my company, but that's separate. That's not me as a person per se, right? To take it on a personal level, honest feedback. I mean, where does your head go when you receive that? Are you just totally receptive to it? How did you build that receptiveness?
We really need to cultivate that skill, because it sounds so great in theory, right? Even when people say, no, honestly, tell me how you really feel. And then you're like, oh, okay. You know, and I think the natural inclination is, because our feelings get hurt, is to get defensive.
Yes.
To get angry. Anger is armor.
Or shut down.
Or shut down, stonewalling. I don't want to talk about this anymore. And as we practice it, you know, I work with a lot with couples and families in my office, and we practice this, and it's such a wonderful thing to finally, when we get to the point where I can take this and I'll be a better human being for it. It's nobody saying I'm an idiot or, you know, I'm not capable. It's just something I could work on. But it does. Initially, your ego will wake up, and that's the whole idea of being present and self-aware as well, is to keep the ego in check. The ego can be really helpful, but when it takes over, it can be our biggest barrier, right? And
I'm glad that we're talking about this, because it just gave me it gave me a little bit of a want to ask this question, but ego. How much of a role does that play in decision making across the board? I mean, we talked about resilience. Yeah. We talked about being receptive. All of this kind of stuff. But to me, it stems down to one thing, and that's ego. Mm-hmm. I was actually saying this to another person the other day, and I'm telling you this because I want you to tell me honest feedback, if it's good or if I'm wrong or if I'm right. Ego, is there sometimes when you walk into a room, you have to know and be adaptive to say, I'm going to walk in with a little bit of ego because I need to, or I'm going to walk in with none because everybody else has such a high ego, and I'm going to feed their ego to go in that room and be that listener. So everybody, you know, you own the room at that time, right? Yeah, so like when I want to own a room, knowing what levels of ego to walk in with, is that something that you have to do? Or is it really just, listen, keep your ego low all the time and always be receptive all the time? Like, am I right?
It does depend on setting, but it depends on how we utilize the benefits of it. Ego can protect us, right? And like Brene Brown talks about, you know, courage and vulnerability. So I'm not going to always be raw and vulnerable to anybody and everybody.
You'll be broken. Yeah.
Exactly. But when you when you gave that example of walking into a room, like, ego in that situation, I recommend keeping in check. I think more, if anything, is I'm just going to be me and being authentic and being real. It's really, really tough to feed our confidence at a healthy level. Again, that inner critic. And I've met people that on the outside appear so confident. And it's shocking what sometimes we say in the back of our minds, right? Yeah. And that's where we want to keep ego at check, right? Is that, am I assuming, oh, that person doesn't like me? Like, that's where ego can get in the way. Who said that, right? Who said that? Is that fear or is that fact? We want to notice our thoughts, right? Because sometimes our thoughts are ego, where we're assuming what other people are thinking, or we're thinking, oh, that, you know, why am I not good enough in this situation? So the inner critic can be really, really harsh, right? And I'm not good enough. And we don't want to embrace that. What we want to embrace is a balanced way of thinking. So no, I'm not so great at this, you know, but I'm really, really great at this other thing. So for example, you know, when I'm working with somebody who, one of my, you know, clients is a university student and hates statistics. And it goes, I just hate stats and I'm barely passing. I'm so stupid. I'm not going to pass. And we're generalizing. It's like, okay, you're going to get through stats class. We're going to get, you know, you're going to get a tutor and you've got over 90% in every other subject. But the brain doesn't remember that. So we have to remember, is ego helping me or harming me? And are my thoughts helping me or harming me? Because the more that we're in tune with and we understand and we know ourselves, we're comfortable with our weaknesses and know that we're all meant in the world to have different strengths and hone in on our strengths. Martin Seligman, he's the father of positive psychology. There's lots of positive psychologists now, but he talks a lot about really working with our strengths as opposed to identifying with our weaknesses, because that's where ego will get in the way, right? Because if I like myself better, like I don't think I'm perfect. It's not ego, I'm perfect, because ego is usually false there. If I like myself better, I'll like you better. The most critical people, the people who, when we are, and I can relate, I'm far from perfect, my goodness, but when we are most critical of other people, we are usually our most critical of ourselves. We are feeling our most insecure. And we're feeling the more negative we are, the more critical we are.
That was almost backwards to me, the way that you were describing it, but really breaking that down in my head, that it actually makes sense. Right? Because you can't listen to somebody else if you're not there. Right.
If you're not being kind and compassionate to yourself, and also if you're wrapped up in negativity and anger and bitterness at the world,
you can't hide that. Not for long. You can't
hide that, and it distorts our view of people, places, and things, right? And then we do make assumptions more readily. So I feel like, it's not that, I think that we have to ask clarifying questions before we make assumptions about people, places, and things, because often our brain will create a story, a narrative, and I know it's happening, and I know what he's thinking, and I know this, and my heart rate will get up, and it's not even happening, right?
Right.
And the majority of the time, the things that actually end up being problems are ones that we didn't see coming, hence why we want to be able to be as game on as possible to deal with it, as opposed to dwelling and ruminating on things that don't even exist, which comes down to being in the present.
What are the common traits you see in somebody who's filled with ego?
A lot of bravado, a lot of competitiveness, usually more critical of others. There's a difference between honest feedback, saying, you know what, this is what I noticed, and because nobody's perfect, so if I say this is what we need to work on, but when we're not in a good place, we're not our best selves. And we've all been there. We all have days when we are our best selves, right? But even when you think of a day when you feel like good and you feel well rested and you feel more present, don't you notice that you're kinder, more compassionate, more patient?
You're more
right? All those things. We're not as quick to react, right? To react to things. And that's when I talk about, like in the beginning, we were talking about the importance of self-reflection or grounding or, doing some things in the morning to get out of your brain. It's so that we cultivate those skills to self-reflect. So for example, if I lose my mind because I had the wrong ingredients in my coffee and they put in one too many sugar and I'm losing it, that's clearly more than just about the coffee.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where we really want to pay attention to that, right? To say, okay, what is this really about? What do I really need to do? And it could be something really simple. I just need to take a few deep breaths. I need to go for a walk, or maybe I need to talk to my friend about something that's really bothering me. What's the background noise that's getting in the way?
Now, I found it really interesting when you made when you said what people have when they have high ego, what their traits are, and when you said they're not very receptive, or they're very sporadic or competitive, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel that they can take honest criticism if they're filled with a lot of ego? Like, will they, okay, Sherry, you told me I need to be better at listening. And I said, well, I am good at listening. Do you feel that I'm not? Would that be a guy that's filled with ego, or would that be a guy that's genuinely curious and wants to know more?
It would depend on the context. I think for most of us, first, because we all have ego, our first reaction is, why'd you say that? That's not true. That's for all of us. But if we're really filled with ego at different points, and again, this isn't a constant throughout our whole life all the time, but when we're really there, we can't hear it. We get so threatened by it. It's actually really sad. It scares us. Right? It's almost like, what if I can't handle this? Or what if that means I'm not a good person? It's the limited beliefs about the feedback that's the problem. That's why noticing our thoughts. So if I think, oh, I'm not a good listener, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible human being, as opposed to, no, that's something I can work on. When we're feeling more confident, it's like, oh yeah, you're not wrong. I could probably work on that. As opposed to, this therefore means I'm not capable, I'm not adequate, I'm not good enough. And that's what happens, that's what ego can do, right? And it takes us away from, really self-reflecting, because we're just trying to avoid it. But what I see is the very energy that it takes to avoid our stuff, because we all have stuff. So whether it be about insecurities, or I feel this, or I find it hard to get feedback, or I get mad when my husband or wife tells me I did something wrong, when we really take stock of those things, that's really, really helpful, right? But when we are stuck in stress and all those things, we're not able to do that because we don't have the energy for it. But then once we do it, and in those moments, we're avoiding it. Yeah. Avoiding those conversations. And even I see in therapy, avoiding dealing with ego, or avoiding even talking about things. Oh, I don't want to go to counseling. I don't want to talk about it, all that trauma or whatever that would be. All of those things, the very energy of avoidance is way worse than facing it. It is, and then not only do we grow, but it's actually easier than we think. So even when you think of ego as, I don't do that, that's not true. I don't know why you would say that. I think you're just being a jerk. Are you having a bad day? That takes more energy than just sitting back and being receptive, and knowing that it doesn't mean that you're a horrible human being. That's the limited belief, right? We have to learn, I think, that we can give honest feedback. It's a part of us that we can work on, but nobody except ourselves is assuming that it means that we're not a good human being.
So one of the things that I will take out of this podcast for sure is that what you're saying is people who are confident actually can take constructive criticism far better than most.
Absolutely.
And you can see that through their reactions.
Yes. Yes.
Sherry, we have to wrap up, but honestly, I want to have you on again, because to me, there's so much more that we have to cover.
Oh, it's lots of fun.
One of the things that we do on every single podcast is we ask, and I got this from Stephen Bartlett, who I love. We ask the prior guest, do you have a question for the next guest? They don't know who you are, none of that. Okay. And I thought that this one was very fitting. So this question came from Matt. He had no idea who he was asking.
Right.
But I thought that this fits really well. It's, what do you think living in alignment really means?
I think living in alignment to me is being sure that I'm aligning with my true self, that there's synchronicity. We can get sidetracked so easily with expectations of society and life. And when I said earlier, the shoulda, woulda, coulda. But when I'm really paying attention to what my life purpose is and what gives me joy and why I'm here, and am I living in alignment with that, So for example, if I value family and I value friends and I value authentic conversations, and then I want to really make sure that when I look at my calendar that my calendar aligns with that. Right? Because sometimes that's what happens. We'll get so busy and I'll think I haven't seen my best friend in 6 months, or we have to do that intentionally, because life will take us sideways. It will take us sideways.
It's the song Elton John, "Blowing in the Wind" or something like that.
Yes.
Or when he was singing about, this wasn't meant in good context, but Marilyn Monroe, the song when he sang "Blowing in the Wind," going all different directions. You're so busy, you're so caught up in life, right? And you need to really just hone in and sit down and be in the present.
And ground ourselves. And it doesn't have to take a long time either. Just a few minutes goes a long way, honestly.
It really does. I mean, you look at people who do just little journaling in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Or
it's
going
not
for
like,
a walk.
It's like when people say, I don't have time. I understand that concept, but
make time.
Make time.
Yeah.
It's to prioritize it.
Everybody has the same clock in a day. I was having this conversation with Kevin this morning. You're at the point now where your job, you'll always have things to do. What are you going to make time for? Because that's the question. You've already filled your time. What are you making time for? Sherry, to summarize, can you give me an overview of the idea of pursuit of happiness? What does that look like? What can people do to pursue happiness? Kind of summarizing our episode.
For sure. I think in the pursuit of happiness, it is, interesting about the question, is aligning with your true self. And it is knowing that happiness is in the simplest of moments, right? Yes, we have huge things that happen and, which are graduations, the birth of babies, and those are beautiful moments. But we can also have beautiful moments in the simplest things of a day if we pay attention, right? And then knowing that in order to do that, in order to be noticing those simple things, we want to maintain realistic optimism and kindness, a non-judgmental perspective, giving back to others, right? Volunteering, like all those things. The true happiness comes from feeling connected and caring about other people.
Sherry, thank you so much.
Thank you
for jumping on. To anybody listening or watching, Sherry and her amazing team of associates provide therapy and counseling just like this. This episode is not sponsored by any means. I was genuinely curious about Sherry and what she had to say, and she brought on a lot of good information. To me, this is the stuff that's important. Understanding how to run a business, that's crucial. But if you have a good mindset and you're very resilient, you'll figure it out. It might take a little longer, but you'll figure it out. So my advice, being a young entrepreneur, and Sherry being in the business for over 25 years, I think we can both agree that if you can master resilience and work at listening and being attentive every single day, you're bound for success.
Definitely.
Not necessarily financially, because it doesn't have to be, right? But just bound for success in general. So
definitely. And probably financially, actually. Probably in
it
all
probably
areas,
turns into that.
Honestly.
Yep. That's true. Guys, thank you so much. Sherry, where can people reach out to you if they want more information on your services?
If you would like more information for our services, please, first of all, contact our website, www.sherrycampbellgroup.com. On the website is outlined all the workshops and presentations that we provide about the resilient culture. I go into a lot of businesses to talk more about these principles. And then for the other side of our business, there's also some pictures of our other associates to provide counseling for individual, for families, for a wide variety of challenges, personal growth, anxiety, depression, all those things. We're here to help you. And the phone number as well is 289-362-3252.
289-362-3252.
Good job.
Give them a call. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. We'll see you in the next episode.